The concluding call occurred at 7 that evening involving this individual. And he arrived claiming he hailed from India, having assumed the identity of a merchant based there. Alarm spread across the monarchical sphere after Sarah Ferguson was allegedly discovered escaping Britain mere instants following the shocking revelation of her actual intentions. What started as hushed murmurs within courtly groups burst into a total controversy as detectives found facts that rendered authorities astounded. From concealed schemes to clandestine gatherings, every fresh disclosure depicted a much more disturbing scenario than anybody anticipated. Consequently, why did she abscond and what reality was she so eager to evade? Remain with us because this developing regal theatrical is more volatile than anyone envisioned. For weeks, the hallways of Royal Lodge buzzed with quiet muttering and anxious whispers. Monarchical helpers, domestic workers, and even remote associates started observing slight alterations, indications that something rare was transpiring behind the majestic barriers of the Windsor property. It was not the sort of commotion one might anticipate from standard regal schedules or the boring arrivals and departures of the residents. These were silent, stress-filled rumbles, the sort that suggested mysteries or designs intentionally withheld from the exterior realm. Workers started noticing trends that were impossible to overlook. Midnight telephone conversations, frequently quiet and rushed, echoed in Sarah Ferguson's personal rooms, with dialogues suddenly ceasing whenever anybody drew near. Bags materialized completely filled only to disappear once more. Closed packets, occasionally bulky with papers, were transported unobtrusively in and out by strange figures, their attendance defined by an atmosphere of necessity that put even veteran employees on guard. The Duchess herself, formerly recognized for her civic charisma and communal elegance, was noticeably altered. She was fidgety, frequently walking exclusively in the silent nooks of the grounds. Worry was carved into her looks. Yet there was additionally a peculiar, unmovable resolve in her gaze, as though she were getting ready for a trip she frantically hoped nobody else could predict or command. As peculiar actions at Royal Lodge continued, murmurs among courtly insiders rapidly intensified into total hearsay. Sarah Ferguson was scheming to depart the United Kingdom. However, this was no informal vacation, no brief retreat from London's overcast heavens or monarchical obligations. The necessity was indisputable. She was not merely seizing a rest, she was getting ready to disappear rapidly, noiselessly, and potentially forever. Every midnight telephone ring, hurriedly filled bag, and stealthy action suggested a lady prepared to forsake the known, walking into the uncharted, propelled by strains, disgraces, and mysteries that could no longer be held inside the castle barriers. Proof of her arrangements became progressively harder to ignore. Participants of the residence described viewing strange mails showing up at weird times bearing huge binders and piles of files. Formal documents that might dictate estate possession, funds, or judicial complications. One chauffeur remarked on odd questions. Queries regarding in-branded airfield shuttles, secret paths, and exclusive agreements that implied concealment at every bend. Companions near the Duchess observed her selling off minor holdings, shifting money quietly, and establishing plans as though she were ending one volume of her existence prior to commencing another far distant. Every fresh sighting appeared to validate the unavoidable reality. Sarah Ferguson was arranging a vanishing act. Yet the inquiries remained weighty and pressing. Vanish from what? Whom was she evading and why at this moment after decades of meticulously steering through the fragile, frequently merciless realm of regal existence? The scheduling was peculiar. She had survived civic inspection previously, withstood controversies, and upheld a cautious equilibrium between private liberty and monarchical anticipation. Nevertheless, this instance, the necessity, the concealment, and the thorough preparation implied that something singular had moved. A menace, a strain, or a disclosure that rendered remaining in the United Kingdom not merely unpleasant but potentially impossible. As the murmurs radiated, the globe outside Royal Lodge stayed oblivious. Periodicals had yet to capture the scent, and social platforms had not burst with conjecture. However, behind the imposing barriers of Windsor, the narrative was already transpiring. A story of dread, tactics, and a lady preparing to walk away from everything she had recognized. Sarah Ferguson's deeds were intentional, computed, and filled with stress. Every midnight ring, every shut packet, and every quietly shifted bag was a stride toward a truth few could yet conceive. The Duchess of York was prepared to disappear, and the reality behind her reasons was on the brink of being exposed. Every action implies that Sarah is prepared to execute an abrupt exit from the United Kingdom. Yet what could have pushed her to this stage? And why the pressing, stealthy hurry to depart sans notification? Now let us reveal the truth behind her frantic attempt to flee. Within the majestic partitions of Royal Lodge, a silent tempest was forming, one that few beyond the portals could totally comprehend. While the populace visualized that Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, inhabited a tranquil, snug existence alongside Prince Andrew, the truth was much more disorderly, tight, and filled with peril. Behind the gold-plated entries, the property had changed from an emblem of grace and advantage into a combat zone of judicial menaces. Expulsion decrees, escalating arrears, and wild bargaining that menaced to unbalance everything Sarah had recognized and leaned upon for ages. Sarah had maintained to pals, kin, and the media that she would never be compelled out of the residence she split with Andrew. She had asserted with quiet yet solid belief that she possessed every entitlement to remain in Royal Lodge, a refuge that had been part of her existence even following her separation. A spot where recollections, schedule, and a feeling of inclusion mingled. However, despite her phrases, the truth was starkly distinct. The Crown Estate, the specific entity that managed the possession and supervision of the grounds, had delivered its verdict, and it was unchangeable. The expulsion was not a menace, it was impending, inevitable, and conclusive. The huge refurbishments that had formerly pledged ease and modernity lay incomplete. Chambers intended to be renovated for seclusion and comfort were now souvenirs of what might shortly be forfeited. King Charles, despite domestic links and private condolences, declined to intercede, leaving Sarah with an expanding feeling of solitude and exposure. The monetary strains she confronted were flattening. To stay in the lodge, she would have required entry to significant capital, cash that, in honesty, she simply did not hold. Years of keeping up facades, philanthropic pledges, and private ventures had left her funds drained. The fissures between reality and the civic picture of riches and safety could no longer be overlooked. Every late invoice, every undone fix, and every judicial menace was a grim reminder that the earth she had relied on was crumbling beneath her feet. Meantime, her enduring agreement with Prince Andrew, formerly odd but tough, was starting to crack under force. Their living situation, which had lasted for decades despite separation and civic inspection, was no longer a wellspring of solace. Andrew, resolved to hold his position in battle, increasingly conflicted with Sarah's wish to depart. She felt snared, boxed in by situations beyond her command and conscious that staying in Royal Lodge was no longer secure for her standing. Her mental calm, or her sense of control, gatherings she had formerly frequented regularly vanished from her diary. Civic showings, formerly common and tactical, stopped completely. The Duchess started maneuvering through her days quietly, intentionally, and with a feeling of aim that implied a scheme forming in silence. Every deed, every hesitation, and every choice was directed by one dominant notion: endurance. This was not concerning a fresh beginning, a relaxed getaway, or a momentary break. It was concerning securing herself from the ruin of everything she had recognized, defending her honor, and steering through a realm that had abruptly become aggressive. The corridors of Royal Lodge, formerly an area of grace and schedule, now resounded with tension, doubt, and the distinct signals of a life in turmoil. In the shade of expulsion decrees, unsettled accounts, and broken unions, Sarah Ferguson's determination solidified. The risks had moved. This was no longer merely a chapter of regal schedule or civic anticipation. It was a fight for endurance. Each silent stride she took, each choice formed in concealment, and each scheme built away from curious eyes was part of a meticulously organized attempt to guarantee that she would not be ensnared, revealed, or beaten. What the populace viewed as elegance, poise, or even quirkiness was in reality the fragile tactics of a lady confronting a ruin she could no longer disregard. Royal Lodge no longer provides Sarah a spot to reside, rendering her exit unavoidable. Yet why depart the United Kingdom entirely when other homes were feasible? Could there be profounder causes behind her stealthy escape? Let us discover. The controversy that pushed Sarah Ferguson toward the edge of quitting the UK had its origins interred deep in history. Nevertheless, it burst into civic sight with a vigor nobody could disregard. What had formerly appeared a remote or forgotten dispute suddenly reappeared, rocking the very basis of her carefully administered existence. The trigger of this revived tempest arrived in the shape of a lone email. One that on its exterior appeared like a standard note but bore results far beyond what anybody could have forecast. Dispatched in 2011, the email disclosed something that instantly stunned the populace and press equally. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, had alluded to Jeffrey Epstein, the shamed investor whose offenses had garnered international headlines, as a supreme pal. The note was shocking, specifically because it had been dispatched mere weeks after she publicly separated herself from Epstein following escalating investigation of his illicit deeds. For many, the paradox was confusing. For others, it was pardonable. How could a participant of the regal clan talk so affectionately about a male widely acknowledged as a sexual predator even after formally severing bonds with him? Once the email was printed in major periodicals, the results were rapid and harsh. Media channels grabbed the revelation, rebroadcasting the narrative across broadcast monitors, digital stages, and written columns. Every term of the note was analyzed, every probable suggestion inspected, and every link investigated. Reporters and pundits argued ceaselessly about her wisdom, her believability, and her duty as a civic figure who had formerly been a notable member of the royal household. The story rapidly moved from a private correspondence to a civic disgrace. One that rendered Sarah Ferguson a mark of fierce inspection and biting observation. The repercussions were instant and ceaseless. Inquiries about her liability emerged from all quarters. Detractors queried how somebody in her stance could so recklessly gamble with civic faith. Backers were compelled to square respect for her benevolent labor and public image with the uneasy truth of her seeming nearness to a man whose deeds had inflicted inconceivable hurt. The email depicted a scene of weak wisdom, leaving her standing in shreds and her private believability dangling by a fiber. This revival of dispute arrived at a specifically exposed instant in Ferguson's existence. Already confronting eviction from Royal Lodge, her fiscal security was shaky, and the merged strain of civic inspection, press focus, and judicial intricacies weighed massively on her. The disgrace, far from being a simple media bump, became a stimulator, hastening choices that had already been boiling beneath the exterior. The Duchess's wish to depart the UK, which may have previously been deemed careful or tactical, now seemed pressing, inevitable, and requisite for her endurance both emotionally and reputationally. Companions and insiders started to observe the alteration instantly. What had formerly been a standard roster of showings, appointments, and benevolent pledges began to stumble. Gatherings vanished from diaries, civic functions were quietly bypassed, and private arrangements escalated. Sarah's motions implied a lady scheming for a conclusive and quiet departure. One that could permit her to separate herself from the unyielding shine of the press, the verdict of the populace, and the strains of her crumbling situations. The email, though a lone record, became far more than just a private note. It signified a shifting point, a moment that solidified the necessity for movement. It was the undeniable proof of why Sarah Ferguson might feel trapped, solitary, and forced to take drastic strides. The Duchess was no longer merely a regal figure steering civic existence. She had turned into a person whose prior errors, whether intentional or misguided, menaced to characterize her present and command her future. Facing the woven pressures of disgrace, fiscal stress, and approaching expulsion, Sarah Ferguson's choice to quit the UK suddenly became not only comprehensible but unavoidable. Defending that email may have been excessive for Sarah, propelling her toward an abrupt escape from the United Kingdom. But what has the email cost her? Could she bear the repercussions while remaining in the United Kingdom? Now let us investigate the civic and private results of Ferguson's email. The echoes from the reappeared email were instant, biting, and cruel. What may have formerly been a confidential, perhaps even ignored communication suddenly became a civic weapon. One that punctured the fragile equilibrium Sarah Ferguson had long upheld between her regal tasks, civic image, and private existence. Within days of the email appearing in periodicals, its results tumbled with frightening velocity. sending tremors through the benevolent sector and the rings of public favor that had long backed her. 7 charities moved resolutely to cut formal bonds with the Duchess of York. Roles that had formerly been emblems of distinct sway and status, patronages and representative posts she had nurtured over the years, were abruptly taken away. Julia's House, a miner's hospice where Ferguson had placed time and visibility, moved first, branding her continued participation as unfitting. The phrasing was cutting, exact, and publicly conclusive, signaling that no quantity of prior favor could guard her from the results of her deeds. The chain reaction proceeded almost immediately. The Teenage Cancer Trust, recognized for its visible projects and influential web, declared its choice to separate. The Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, the Children's Literacy Charity, the National Foundation for Retired Service Animals, Prevent Breast Cancer, and even the British Heart Foundation ensued, each quoting the unfeasibility of upholding a link without drawing dispute or civic recoil. What had formerly been a web of praises and civic duty now became a grim reminder of her exposure. A civic log of career solitude that worsened her private chaos. For Ferguson, the blow was far greater than a sequence of career defeats. Each cut tie, each publicly declared retraction of backing, sliced deeper than simple reputational harm. These groups had been part of her persona, her habit, and her feeling of aim. They were conduits through which she cast sway, showed empathy, and kept relevance beyond her regal rank. Forfeiting them was not merely about appearances, it was about wearing away the very basis of her civic existence. Peeling away both visibility and validity. The disgrace, consequently, was double in character. It was both civic and private. To the Globe, it showed as a breach of etiquette and decency, a slip that pulled headlines and social platform inspection alike. To Ferguson herself, it became intensely personal. These were areas she had fostered, ventures she had backed, relations she had constructed. Their sudden ending generated a void of intent and backing that increased the strain she was already under from fiscal doubt, climbing press attention, and the hovering menace of expulsion from Royal Lodge. Every day that elapsed, the solitude deepened. Appointments that had formerly been standard were now reminders of what she had forfeited. Summons that had formerly been mechanical were now clearly missing. Even informal exchanges bore a burden of verdict and inspection that was hard to evade. The email had changed from a simple written log into a catalyst for a sequence of fast life-altering results. Each charity's retreat boosted the others, creating a growing effect of career denial that left Ferguson's civic standing brittle and unstable. The rising career and private emergency left Sarah Ferguson with no moment to pause. Quitting the UK was no longer elective, it had become critical. Escaping ceaseless press inspection, civic verdict, and the choking strains of regal existence was vital. The merged load of disgrace, denial, and worry made her necessity to flee instant, unpreventable, and essential for existence. In brief, the disgrace had altered her existence overnight. It was no longer about ill-judged terms in an email. It was about the very actual results that ensued and the critical strides she now had to take to keep her honor, her freedom, and her mind. The Globe was watching, the charities had voiced, and Ferguson had no option but to map a route away from the center of the tempest. Sarah battled to manage the career denial, prompting her to hunt for a spot where she might recover relevance. Yet who could back her during this testing interval? Or has everyone turned their rear on her amid these troubles? Let us uncover the specifics. The instant tidings of Sarah Ferguson's intended exit from the UK seeped to the media. The halls of authority within the castle were cast into instant and fierce worry. Murmurs of a regal emergency radiated rapidly, bouncing through every division, every council chamber, and every nook where choices about the crown were formed. Elder guides, skilled in handling scandals and civic relations catastrophes, acknowledged almost instantly that this leak possessed the capacity to spark a press tempest of unmatched size. Headlines could burst, hearsay could spin, and the monarchy itself, already steering a fragile equilibrium of custom, debt, and civic inspection, risked being swallowed in disorder. At the core of this sudden fright was King Charles, who was already juggling the requirements of civic tasks, regal appointments, and the steady inspection that arrives with his rank. He had little desire for extra disgrace, specifically one that could depict the regal clan as split or broken. The notion that a former daughter-in-law, long used to the regal spotlight but now under fierce strain, might slide quietly out of the nation without supervision was viewed as a major menace. Not just to the family's picture but to the carefully upheld sense of order and command within the organization. The human emotional reply was just as pressing. Sarah's daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, immediately leapt into motion upon learning the disturbing news. Worried, nervous, and resolved to defend both their mom and the family's unity, they hurried to Royal Lodge. Their arrival was critical and driven. They required answers, seeking to grasp not only why their mom was thinking of departing but also how far along her schemes had advanced. The sisters begged her not to vanish, emphasizing that unity and visibility were vital at a time when the family needed to keep its joint presence and calm the populace. Their interference was both private and tactical, an effort to ground their mom amidst swirling havoc while keeping the families standing. Prince Andrew's response was equally sharp. Though separated in certain ways from Ferguson, he was keenly conscious of how her exit could be read by the periodicals, the populace, and the broader regal web. He demanded that she stay at Royal Lodge, cautioning that quitting, especially in secrecy, would be viewed as a confession of fault. In his view, a civic disappearance would not signal a hunt for calm or safety but a run from liability, feeding a story of disgrace and doubt that could damage them both. Nevertheless, despite the pressing pleas from family members and the heavy considerations of the palace, Sarah Ferguson faced a climbing tempest of her own. Years of prior scandals had left her under ceaseless inspection. Her fiscal pressures were rising, and every civic showing had become a possible trap. The total weight of press attention, judicial doubts, and private stress made the choice to leave feel less like a selection and more like a necessity. The exterior world may have viewed it as rash or theatrical, but for Ferguson, it was a frantic attempt to regain some amount of freedom and calm in the center of ceaseless inspection. When lenses inevitably caught the scent of her exit, the story changed instantly. The narrative shifted from a private quest for relief to a theatrical caught-escaping saga. In the view of the populace, Ferguson was no longer a lady quietly seeking ease from strain, she was somebody running from the reality, escaping duty, and dodging the shine of media and nobility alike. What was meant as a careful private shift was remolded as a highly visible disgrace, boosting every worry, every guess, and every verdict. In a matter of hours, the scheme to quit quietly became a show, forcing Ferguson into the very spotlight she had hoped to evade. Her nearest family members, especially her daughters, offered backing during this testing time. But could they supply her a secure spot to escape as she wished? Or would they counsel her to remain, face the claims, and brave the recoil? Now let us investigate a secret shelter amid disgrace and ceaseless inspection. Portugal calls. Amid swirling conjecture about where Sarah Ferguson might hunt shelter, recent accounts have begun to shine light on her probable destination. Per the Daily Mail, Fergie is anticipated to move to Portugal, taking up occupancy in Princess Eugenie's vast £3.6 million villa. It appears that Eugenie and her spouse Jack Brooksbank have gone to great lengths to make the former Duchess of York feel at home, allegedly readying a lavish grand suite within their house. A resident reportedly remarked, "The rumor here is that Fergie will be arriving sometime in January," signaling that her arrival is approaching and carefully plotted. The picked location is not just any property, it is tucked within the exclusive Costa Terra Golf and Ocean Club, a refuge of sun, ocean, and high-profile inhabitants. This luxury resort community has long pulled stars and elite figures from around the globe, drawn by its seclusion, scenic beauty, and carefully managed social vibe. Fergie's possible new neighbors read like a Hollywood top list. Madonna, Scarlett Johansson, Nicole Kidman, Alicia Vikander, and Michael Fassbender are all reportedly part of the group. For someone seeking to escape the ceaseless stare of British rags, Costa Terra offers a unique mix of ease, discretion, and high society fellowship, a spot where she can step into relative obscurity while circled by known faces from global star rings. Sources near the situation imply that the villa has been meticulously readied for her stay. From rich fittings to private perks, every nuance appears aimed at supplying Ferguson with a sense of asylum amid the media tempest she left behind. This preparation emphasizes the gravity of her move. It is not a brief retreat or informal getaway but rather a carefully organized relocation designed to offer safety, privacy, and the capacity to begin rebuilding her life far from the inspection of Royal Lodge and the UK press. While the specifics of her stay, whether short-term or more lasting, remain unsure, the social blending seems hopeful. One insider speaking to the Daily Express noted, "How long she will stay is anyone's guess. But if it is a long-term move, I can guarantee she will fit well into the social scene. Scores of celebrities and stars have been snapping up properties in the area." Indeed, the region has increasingly become a lure for high-profile figures seeking privacy without sacrificing access to rich amenities and like-minded social circles. For Ferguson, who now finds herself steering a mix of private, career, and reputational strains, Costa Terra offers a rare chance to regain command over her setting. The move also carries symbolic weight. By joining her daughter Eugenie in Portugal, Ferguson signals a retreat to familial backing, a web of care that could prove priceless as she reconstructs her life amid lingering controversies. The nearness to close family may offer both emotional comfort and tactical perks, allowing her to regroup while remaining connected to a trusted inner circle. It is a calculated balance. The distance provides physical split from disgrace, while family presence ensures she is not entirely isolated during a testing period. Beyond family considerations, Costa Terra provides Fergie with an environment designed for discretion and safety. Stars, royalty-adjacent figures, and wealthy international residents pick such enclaves precisely because they can move freely without the constant invasion of media attention. For a woman whose every move has been dissected and debated publicly, this environment represents not just a relocation but a sanctuary, a chance to exist in a quieter, more controlled sphere even while the outside world watches and speculates. In sum, Sarah Ferguson's potential move to Princess Eugenie's mansion in Portugal represents far more than a change of address. It is a tactical and deliberate step providing refuge, family support, and an opportunity to integrate into a vibrant, discreet, and socially rich environment. With the Costa Terra community offering both luxury and anonymity, Ferguson may finally find the space to navigate her next chapter on her own terms, shielded from the relentless inspection that has followed her across the UK. While her stay's duration remains uncertain, one thing is clear: this relocation is a carefully considered attempt to reclaim agency, privacy, and dignity in the midst of a life forever under the public eye. So what do you make of Sarah leaving the UK? Could she truly escape the scandal? Or will it follow her? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.